Hello and welcome to the May 1st Recreational Astronomy Night meeting of the RASC Toronto Centre. My name is Paul Markov and I'll be hosting the meeting as usual this evening. We are at the Ontario Science Centre in front of a live audience of about 25 people tonight. For our online viewers, please join us in person next time if you can. And for those of you who cannot be here, the online broadcasts will continue. Thanks to our AV tech team that's made up of Andrew and Betty Reed, Ward LeGros, and Enya Chimucci. Thanks again for making these live broadcasts possible for us. It's a lot of work. We have, as you know, I'm always looking for presentations for following meetings, and we do have a couple of openings available for the June 5th meeting. Wednesday night. Our meetings are typically held on the first Wednesday of each month. And in regards to this evening, we're going to skip the sky this month in favor of one additional solar eclipse presentation. In fact, the whole evening is dedicated to the solar eclipse. And just show of hands, how many of you managed to see all or part of the eclipse a while ago? Good, I see most hands up. Very well. I'm glad you saw it. I saw it as well, of course. And I want to let you know about the speakers. So we have presentations that cover a wide geographic area. We have Dan Falk presenting, and the title of his presentation is Chasing Eclipse number 6, from Eglinton Avenue to Arkansas. What went right, plus lessons for next time. Ralph Chou will talk about Totality over Texas, and Ed Treijs will tell us about a boring eclipse. Interesting. And then we'll have Jason Oakley, and he'll talk to us about Total Eclipse at Crystal Beach from Fort Erie. We've had word that Ralph Chou is stuck in traffic, so he's scheduled to go second. We may advance the other presentations until he arrives here. Tom Luton, our president, will close the meeting with announcements, and we should be done around 9:30 this evening. If you're watching online and have a question, please enter it in the chat box, a YouTube chat box, and Enya will ask the question on your behalf to the speaker. And I see, yes, I'm being reminded that for in-room questions, instead of me walking around with a mic, please stand and go to the microphone right in front of here. Due to technical reasons, we prefer you to walk up to the microphone tonight. And then if you're watching us online, please let us know where you're from. And in regards to people here in the room, anybody here for the first time, member or not? Show of hands again. Good. Good to see some new faces in the room. All right, so we're all set to start the presentation. So I'm going to call on Dan to present about his experience.
Yeah, thanks. And you know, I always enjoy presenting to this group. I've stood up here, well, actually not in this specific room, but in general, before this group, a number of times over the years, and I always enjoy it. I didn't time out this talk, so when I start to go over time, whichever one of you has the cane thing, just yank me off, and that, yeah, it is what it is. So I had been to 5 previously. I feel quite lucky. I know Ralph's not here yet. Ralph has been to more than that. Some of you have been to more than that. But 5's not a bad number, so I knew that, well, you know, if I'm clouded out or if the plane crashes, you know, at least I saw 5. But I was still very excited to try to get number 6. The original plan was something like this. I mean, I'm going to skip some of the boring details, but I actually had a reservation for myself and my friend at a place outside, or actually in Fredericksburg originally. That one was unreservationed on me from the good people at Expedia, presumably because the hotel itself said, I'm sorry, we can't fulfill this reservation. And if you know that episode of Seinfeld where Jerry says, well, you know, the whole thing about a reservation is you have to actually keep the reservation. Anyway, but I don't want to digress too much. But then I was able to rebook a place in the suburbs of San Antonio. So at least I did have that. And it was actually in the path. At any rate, so that was sort of the original plan. And then what we decided to do was to fly into Houston because the flights are cheap going into Houston. That all worked out okay. I thought, all right, we might as well check out the Johnson Space Center. And that was fine. Some of you, I'm sure, have been there. There's a lot of very interesting things to see there. The Saturn V is not actually curved. That's me going like this with my iPhone. But yeah, it's kind of cool that they've got some neat exhibits there. Actually, Mick Jagger was there just about a week ago. If I had stayed 3 or 4 weeks longer, I could have run into Mick because they opened their North American tour in Houston the other night. So, okay, then we headed west via San Antonio, but we kept going because we wanted to see some things out west, including some ghost towns, but also the McDonald Observatory. That's me in front of one of the domes. Kind of a cool place to visit if you ever have a chance to be in that part of the world. So the big one, the Hobby Eberly telescope, is one of the biggest in the world, although it is made up of hexagonal bits, so it's not actually a single cast mirror, but it is enormous. The Otto Struve telescope, and I think you can sort of deduce this just from looking at the exterior dome there, it's about the same size and of the same era as our own David Dunlap. And you can just sort of tell, right? The style is the same, everything about it. You could almost swap it with the DDO. But anyway, yeah, kind of a cool play. It's some interesting, a visitor center with interesting things to see and a cinema and that kind of thing. So then came the big decision, because now we're up to about, I guess, 3 days, 2.5, 3 days before the day of the eclipse. And are we going to keep our reservation in the northwestern suburbs of San Antonio, using that as a home base to try to get to Fredericksburg or Caryville, or further southwest towards the Mexican border? But like many other people, we were just glued to our internet connection, looking at the cloud cover forecast, all that stuff. A lot of you have been through this, I'm sure. So trying to figure out, what are we going to do? And I guess, well, one small good thing that I got out of it was this meme, which I think sort of sums up the situation. Now, in the end, we did not go to northern Maine because that would have been pretty crazy, but I'm sure some people did. And indeed, I'm sure there must be some significant number of people who had been planning on Texas and radically changed their plans. So we decided to, and actually I suggested to my friend, well, what if we just, returned the rental car and flew to Montreal, right? And it would not have been the craziest thing, but we decided it was just crazy enough not to do that. Although from what I understand, Montreal got quite good weather. So we decided to sort of do this by car. So we drove and we canceled a reservation in the suburbs of San Antonio, canceled another, so that would have been the 7th. And for the 6th, we had a reservation in Ozona, if I'm remembering the name of the town. So we canceled that also and just started driving. Stop in Dallas. You will recognize I've got my laser pointer here. Let's see, haven't used this baby in a while, but anyway, you know all this. The school book depository here and the famous grassy knoll. Abraham Zapruder was standing just about there. And the grass is actually, some of you know this if you've been there, but the grass is worn down at the spot where Abraham Zapruder was standing, because people like to stand where Abraham Zapruder stood and get their picture taken. And there's even an X literally on the road. So it's part of, the whole thing is sort of a memorial, but it's sort of interesting that there's literally an X painted on the road. And yes, sure enough, during the breaks in the traffic, people like run out there and stand on the X and get it. So, which is a bit crazy if you think about it, but it was interesting to see. Kept going, spent the night at Sulphur Springs. And yeah, actually, and I knew people who were going to be in Dallas. So it was on my mind. Like, what if we just picked Dallas as our spot? But based on the forecast, we thought, no, we're going to keep going. And it was just sort of a judgment call, like how far? Like, are we going to go all the way into Missouri? But which would have been insane, by the way. That would have been, I think, more crazy than returning the car and flying to Montreal. But in the end, we compromised for Arkansas. But we spent the night in Sulphur Springs and then carried on to Bald Knob. So this would have now been the night of the 7th. And yes, it was possible to get a motel room. Bald Knob is just inside the path of totality. And it was not overpriced. And the only thing I would say is, yeah, the choice of motels was not extensive at all. And the one we ended up in was really pretty crummy and mediocre. And you would never sort of choose to stay there if you didn't have to. But we're glad that there was something available. Here's a close-up of the area. So we pondered our next move. Um, and yeah, for a variety of reasons, we thought Batesville looks good. It's not right on the center line, but still due to have 4 minutes and 1 second of totality. We studied Google Maps, as one does, and we knew, of course, the sun's going to be high in the sky, so I mean, obstacles weren't likely to be much of a problem. But having said that, we didn't want obstructions to the south or to the west, right? Um, so we thought, okay, there's a park here, Riverside Park. It looks like it has amenities and stuff. Some further Googling revealed that it has public toilets and gazebo, bandshell, and stuff, all of which turned out to be the case. It turned out to be a pretty good spot. Morning of the big day. Where is everybody? So this is interesting because we had, and I'm sure many of you had these same fears. We were worried, like, all the things that could go wrong. Like, okay, we're trying to get out of San Antonio, let's say, because that had been the original plan. Trying to get out of San Antonio, and whoops, we can't even get from the motel driveway onto the highway because it's already bumper to bumper. Or what if we get, halfway to Fredericksburg and then we're stuck, and the state troopers would be there. You can't pull over on the side of, we're imagining all these worst case scenarios of just insane traffic. On a related note, we stocked up with like chips and cookies and water, which we then had to throw out at the end because we got all this stuff thinking it was going to be the apocalypse of Eclipse traffic, and none of that came to pass. Now, granted, I'll just go back here for a second. It is sort of the middle of nowhere, which is, I think, part of the reason that the traffic was so light. So off to the right-hand edge of this would be Memphis. And yeah, I guess people from Memphis would be trying to get into the path, but nobody's going to be coming down here from Indianapolis because why bother? The weather's already good in Indianapolis. And honestly, the number of people coming up from Dallas is not going to be that great because they'll come as far as Texarkana or wherever the weather starts to clear up, and that'll be good enough. Nobody's going to go, who's going to come all the way to central Arkansas? So I think that's part of the explanation for the traffic being mercifully light. And here we are. We left our motel at the crack of dawn. I don't know what time this shot is. Probably around 9:30 or 9:45 a.m. There's a couple of keeners, but basically the park is empty. Check the app. Things are looking really good. And I don't know. There's probably a word in German for like when everything is going your way, but you still manage to mess up stuff in spite of that. But I cannot blame the weather. The weather was basically ideal. Other than I could complain that it was a little too hot. Okay, now I mean I know this isn't strictly speaking a photography club, but I'll just I'll try not to get too bogged down in all this. But that's me at our viewing site next to the river. 300 millimeter prime lens that I got not actually off eBay, but off KEH, which is a good website for this sort of thing. Fairly cheap, compatible with a modern DSLR, even though the lens is from circa 1985 or something. And nice sharp images, and also nice and stiff, meaning that you're not accidentally going to change the focus. That's good if you're putting filters on and off and that kind of thing. Filter, going strong from 1998. Only ever used it twice previously because I didn't bother taking close-up shots for certain of the eclipses because traveling to another continent and just didn't want to take all kinds of junk. But I did use it in 98 and 2017. So this is my third time using it. Okay, conditions are really good in central Arkansas. Yeah, the lens works fine. The filter from 1998 still works fine. Here's a cropped image. I'm satisfied. Like, there you go. First bite's getting taken. I might add, right on schedule. The C1 and later C2, 3, and 4 all happened just when the internet said they were going to happen. You can see some sunspots there. If you get bored, I wrote a piece for Scientific American about sort of how I find eclipses kind of comforting in that they always run on schedule as compared to bus and train schedules where you never know. Crowd gets bigger, but honestly only somewhat bigger. The big one here, that's the gentleman who owns it, 8-inch reflector, and he drove in his van from Las Vegas. That's quite a drive. So I think he was probably the first one there. But really, it never. So I think this is during the partial phases, and it never got substantially more crowded than what you see in the lower two images. So sure, there's a bit of a crowd. They probably get a bigger crowd for July 4th or something. There's also some kind of Christmas festival that happens there. I don't know. But basically, it was great. Not only was there a public washroom, they had like extra portable toilets set up. I don't know if that was just for Eclipse Day or if they have them there for a long term or whatever, but they were ready and there were food trucks, which we didn't really need because we brought all this food with us. But they were really set up for visitors, and that was all just fine. My little pinhole thing. Now that took a lot of work to prepare in Toronto before heading down. Also, it's not the state that I was actually in for the eclipse, but we did have to drive through it to get to Arkansas. That worked out very nicely. Some people, not you guys, because you know all this. Some people ask me, Dan, how do you do that? What's going on? But you know what it takes to. You need a pin and some tinfoil and some cardboard and the internet and some things. But it can be done. The yellow sticky note just apologizes for the fact that I was in Arkansas, not Texas. Okay. So again, not to get too bogged down in photography, but I shot in manual exposure during the partial phases. Why not? You have all sorts of time to choose the perfect settings. Then for totality, I switched to aperture priority automatic with auto bracketing, meaning you push the cable, the shutter button on your cable release. Your camera's on a tripod and takes 5 exposures, right? 2 above, 2 below, and you have up to 5 images. Hopefully, one is perfect. But why bother switching? Why not just stay in manual mode, especially since the internet and my own past experience, although not with this camera, not with this lens, but the internet and my past experience does basically tell you what the correct exposure is, certainly to within plus or minus 2, or I mean, it doesn't have, the plus minus doesn't have to be plus 1 unit, 1 EV, it could be 2 or 2.5 or whatever. So why did I switch? I don't know why I switched. It seemed like the right thing to do. And the results, and honestly, it's not the end of the world. These are not horrible, but for those of you who know photography, which is probably all of you, I mean, honestly, it's better not to think about this, because if you're just a person off the street, you go, hey, Dan, look, Dan got these great pictures of the eclipse, woohoo! But if you actually notice, like, these are all, I mean, what's the technical term, like saturated or blown pixels? If you tweak the levels thing, these are just like that donut can't be removed. It's pure white. It's just whatever that's called. It's not quite as bad here, but these are grossly overexposed. And yes, I know there is no one correct exposure for the solar corona because you keep the shutter open longer, you see more of it and that. But I think so yes, I mean, in terms of seeing the details out here, okay, fine. But then the price you pay is this donut of saturated pixels. So we can talk later. You can say, Dan, don't feel so bad. It's only 5 stops overexposed, or if you think it's 10 stops overexposed, you can tell me. I won't be offended. But this worked out okay by making everything small. And interestingly, again, the focus is fine. The joke I've been telling people is that in 2017, I nailed the exposure, and in 2024, I nailed the focus. So, maybe in 2028, it'll all come together. But this works out okay, and everything's small, and you can't really see sort of hides the problems. I haven't decided. I mean, maybe I'll get this printed out. I don't know, but it's not bad. And yes, everybody has something similar to this on the internet. What else? Oh, just for fun. Of course, I had 2 cameras going. The other one was a film camera with a 100mm lens, and it's actually a better exposure because it doesn't overexpose the corona as much. But of course, obviously, it's very small because it's only a 100mm lens. There's a close-up of it, and yes, obviously, it reveals the grain of the film. Plus, it's pushed 2 stops, which amplifies the grain a little bit. And yes, you know why I'm showing you this one. It's longer exposure, and yes, of course, that is Venus. So that was intentional. I wanted to get the eclipse plus Venus shot. For whatever reason, I thought it would look kind of better than this, but it's still not bad. I mean, I sort of would have liked to have, the sun looking like it did in the previous picture, and yet having Venus in it. But of course, that's not how these things work. And that's a minute or 45 seconds later. That's the diamond ring from C3 using the film camera. Okay, so I did another meme, and this is the saddest one of the memes. So that's meant to be me telling people, put your camera away and live in the moment. And you take that advice yourself, right? You take that advice yourself. Well, I mean, maybe in 2026 or 2027 or 2028, I'll take that advice myself. So what have we, meaning me, learned? Yeah, camera, lens, remote control, auto bracketing, tripod, everything in focus, solar filter, partial phases. Okay, everything's satisfactory there. Yeah, I still haven't nailed totality. Still didn't put my camera in what I think would be the correct mode for totality, which would be manual. I tried to do too many things, and having said that, there's stuff that I just forgot to do. Like I thought, okay, it's 4 minutes and 1 second, during that 4 minutes and 1 second, there should be time to take my iPhone and put it in panorama mode, but vertically, and go like this, right? So yes, I know the sun is very high up, somewhere between 60 and 65 degrees, but in panorama mode, that should be no problem. Slipped my mind, totally forgot to do it. Also, there was a family with some school-age kids just to the left of me, and one of the kids came over to ask like questions during Totality, and like I was talking to the kids before Totality, and in fact, I enjoy talking to kids about astronomy, but he was, we're talking about like, oh, which planet is that? And it's like, I kept my cool, but I was like, kid, just leave me alone for the next 4 minutes and 1 second, and then we can talk about it. But yeah, it is what it is. And so a few other, sorry, I don't want to get, I know I got probably overtime, but a couple other things that I just kind of tried to do and they didn't work. So I had that app, I forgot what it's called, but there's, the Eclipse app that does the time, right? So presumably, if it works, but I didn't get it to work, the audio, gives you an audio countdown for second contact and third contact. So a few days before, I was experimenting with the app, and you open up the app and it says, which eclipse are you interested in? There's a menu of eclipses, and I put in April 8th, 2024, and feed it some more information. And and I'm like, well, is it going to know my latitude and longitude? I mean, it should, right? But I was also wondering anyway. And then I put the app away, and then now it's an hour before the eclipse or half an hour before the eclipse, and I pull out the app again, and it's forgotten everything. It's like, which eclipse are you interested in? It's like, screw it, I'm not going to type in that information again. So I'm sure it's on me for just not being smart enough to use the app. And then the other thing I did, and sorry, I know this is a little bit boring, but as backup to that, I created an audio file, like an MP3 file at home, based on the stats for Fredericksburg, so it'd be a different start time, but an audio countdown that all I would have to do is, I loaded it onto my tablet, and all I would have to do is push play at the right moment, and it would at least count down to C2. Now, it would get C3 wrong because Batesville isn't Fredericksburg, but it would only be off by a little bit. And everything else would be off, but it would at least tell me how much time I have before the diamond ring, and an estimate for second diamond ring. And the only catch, so I wrote down the exact time that I had to push play, and then like something happened, and it's like, well, that's it. I mean, if it's going to be off by a minute, it's not worth doing it. So I just put it away. And I guess the only other thing is when I was taking pictures with my DSLR and the telephoto lens of Totality, and it was on aperture priority automatic, I think what it was doing was it was getting fooled by the vast amount of darkness, right? So there's the bright thing, which is the eclipse, and then there's all this darkness. And it's trying to find a compromise between the darkness and the light, which is not great. And as I pushed the button, I could see it was taking this really long exposure, and my brain was just exploding, like, why, Mr. Shutter, are you staying open for 15 seconds? Like, I'm not a camera, and I know that 15 seconds is too long, right? It's a fairly bright scene. It's like being under a full moon. And the only small thing that I comfort myself with is that I was smart enough to just keep pushing that darn button, because I knew if I tried to diagnose the problem, the 4 minutes would just be over, and I'd still be there going, what's happening? Why is my camera doing this? So anyway, some lessons. And to look up at the eclipse, the emoji didn't translate, but that was the like a stopwatch emoji. So yes, I did look up, and I know I looked up because I did take in Venus and Jupiter, and I answered the kid's question about which planet was which. And he was asking something like, oh, how do I know when I have to put the eclipse glass back on? I said, kid, you're going to know. It's going to be obvious when the sun comes back out. That's when you put them back on. But yeah, I did look up at the eclipse for like a brief moment. Took a scenic route back to Houston, flew home, and yeah, like the rest of you, I'm thinking about Spain, Egypt, and Australia. And yeah, don't drive along the highway with your eclipse glasses on. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, happy to answer them. Thanks.
While you think about your questions, maybe do we have any questions online? Yes. You need a microphone? Oh, come on. I'm breaking the rule. I hear you right now.
Let's see if it's an easy question or a hard question.
I didn't want to carry my laptop. So we have a comment from Grace Horvatin. Your excitement in sharing your experience is awesome. We felt the same ahead of it and during the eclipse. Glad it all worked out for you.
Oh, yeah, well. Yeah.
And there's some questions going on online about where people have seen the eclipse from. in my case, Western Oakville, Ontario, and Grace Horvatin from Magog, Quebec, southwest of Sherbrooke.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I mean, I've just been very keen, since I've got back. Obviously, my friends have been telling me where they were, et cetera. And I'm really, and of course, we have more talks coming up tonight. So I'm very keen to hear what people saw from where, whether the places that were expected to be cloudy actually were cloudy, or maybe they were only partly cloudy, that kind of thing. And also, I know I spent some time complaining about, here I was looking down at my camera and pushing buttons, and I should have been enjoying it. But something that was very, very positive was this communal spirit. There were a couple of hundred people in that park in Batesville. Everybody was in a good mood. There were kids. I mean, it was like a school day, but whatever. Parents took their kids out of school for the day, or maybe classes were canceled, like they were in Southern Ontario. I don't know, but it was, families were playing frisbee and just yeah, just everybody was in a good mood, and not just in Batesville, Arkansas, but for several thousand kilometers along that path, and that was just kind of inspiring. That's something that I would say, like, nothing could go wrong with that. That communal spirit is sort of a given, and no amount of doing stupid things with your camera takes that away. So yeah, that was what I really enjoyed. Yep.
Good. Thank you so much, Dan, for sharing your experience. And I can relate to a lot of the things that you mentioned. I showed up at the Eclipse with 2 telescopes, 2 pairs of binoculars, 2 tripods. I only used 1 telescope, of course, because those were the fastest 3 minutes I've ever experienced. All right, so we're going to take a short break while we switch computers here for the next speaker. So we're going to go to Fun Facts, and we'll be right back online in a moment. All right, and we're back online, and our next presenter is Ralph Chou. He'll talk about totality over Texas.
Well, I'm really happy to be able to report on a successful trip, although it had its moments. But anyway, just to get started, we all know that the eclipse started over the equatorial Pacific, went across Mexico and Texas, and then eventually up to this area and away. And the problem that we all had was trying to figure out how to play the weather, particularly. And in looking at the path, what I thought about was, how can we get maximum totality with minimum weather? So what do? You take a look at all the available resources, online and otherwise, and think about what are the chief things you want to do for a group? Because very early on, I got people asking me, are you going to organize a trip? Okay, fair enough. Yes, let's try to do a trip. So what do we need to do? Well, safety and accessibility are certainly very, very important. Uh, but even more important is thinking about the climatology. You know, what are the chances of cloud, storms, precipitation, all of those things. And of course, taking a look at all of the material that was available online, one of the things that was quite obvious was that along the Eclipse path, there were areas where, yes, climate was good, uh, accessibility was good, safety, not so much. Uh, so the question was, where do we go? And Texas seemed to be a good compromise. And as you can see from this figure from Jay Anderson's website, you take a look at the various shades there. Where it's blue is where typically, according to the climatological records, you have the least chance of cloud. And so luckily the path went through close to that area, so seemed reasonable. The other thing we had to think about was costs, because we've seen over the years that you can get gouging occasionally, and certainly the land of opportunity was no exception. So anyway, let's see where we go from here. A lot of discussion ensued. We had a number of people who were interested in the trip, and we were canvassing. And Lucy Winicki was my co-organizer for this trip. And between her and me and the other folks who were interested, we more or less came up with a short getaway special with this itinerary. The idea was to fly into Houston on the Friday before the eclipse, visit the Johnson Space Center on the Saturday, take a chartered coach to the western end of Texas where the totality was potentially maximal, and then from wherever we were staying, probably Del Rio, then go down to a site closer to the center line, see the eclipse, and then the next day take the bus back to Houston and fly home. And this was pretty much settled fairly early on. Everybody seemed pretty happy with the idea. And then the question was how to wrap up all the details in advance. Here's the list of participants. We had 22 people in total, most from the Toronto Centre, but we had 3 people who joined us from away. Kai Hui, who is a member of the Vancouver Centre and a friend of Phil Chou's, was a late joiner to the group. And we had Gareth Jarrett, a former member who now lives in the United Kingdom, along with his spouse, Carolyn Hyde. And they contacted me and asked if they could join us for Eclipse Day. So they signed in for part of the trip. And that was our group of 22. Now I see a number of the members of the group in the audience here with us tonight. Well, the thing was, it rapidly turned out that hotels came at a premium. And in some cases, it was pretty excessive. In Houston, we had no problem with making the bookings there. The Courtyard by Marriott in NASA Clear Lake was within walking distance of the Johnson Space Center across a 4-lane road. And it had reasonable rates and a lot of restaurants nearby, so that was okay. Del Rio, on the other hand, was another problem in many ways. You know, since we were already dealing with Marriott, we thought, okay, well, let's go talk to the Marriott people and see what they were offering. And bear in mind, this is spring of 2023. And already the Marriott was offering $1,000 a night US. There was a sort of a bidding war, as it were. They had a website where you could tap in your details and ask for quotations. And the rates were all over the place, but the Motel 6, which normally goes for about 50 to 60 US dollars a night, they were the low balls at around 430 US a night. And the interesting thing was that Motel 6 was the only one that was prepared to sign a contract in advance. So given that, we thought, okay, let's iron things down and get the contract. And so we finalized the group reservation by the summer of 2023. We dickered about the payment arrangements, and those were finalized late in the year. And then we had the final confirmations and advance payments made in March, about a week before departure. And so we had everything settled, and we didn't have to cope with what a lot of people encountered in Niagara, where their reservations got unexpectedly canceled, and they got upsized, et cetera, et cetera. So we were happy with that. As for the logistics of getting around, one of the things was ground transport from the airport to the hotel, and moving 18 people, which is what we were working with, we thought better to do this in a group. And so we went online, and there's a very interesting arrangement where you can, again, put in your details, and the bus companies will bid on the services. And so you get back a whole list of offers, and you go through them, check the ratings and so on. And Lucy and I spent a lot of time looking at this before settling on that. And similarly, we had to think about the trip from Houston to Del Rio, where our hotel was, the return trip. And we wanted to have something somewhat better than a school bus. So, luxury coaches with enough capacity to hold passengers and luggage and so on. And again, we were able to come up with some arrangements, and they were all confirmed by the beginning of March and paid in full on our credit cards by the end of the month. So that was all done and dusted as well. And everybody was given the information about where we had to go and how to get there. And so they made their own flight arrangements, and a number of us rendezvoused at the Toronto airport early on the morning of April the 5th for the flight south. And so we got to Houston International, I guess more or less on time. And here we are waiting at the arrivals area for the shuttle bus that never came. Well, where was it? So out comes the cell phone, you phone them up, and getting past the automated attendant and the bulky operators and so on, finally we found out that our bus was waiting on the arrivals level because he had come in to the departures level, which was so heavily congested, the police moved him out and said, "Get out of here, we don't want you here." And somehow he didn't have our contact phone numbers, even though it was on the contract. Okay. Anyway, it took us about an hour to find the bus, and we got everybody up to the arrivals level, loaded up, and we headed over to the Courtyard by Marriott for the check-in, which luckily proceeded without any problems. We met up with Dennis, who had driven down, and everything seemed to be fine. And the rest of the afternoon was more or less on our own, doing whatever we needed to do. Next morning, Dennis took this lovely shot of the crescent sun, the crescent moon, where I'm thinking. 7:40 in the morning, here's the old moon ahead of the new moon, and under a very nice clear sky in Houston. Breakfast, going around, I found a Shipley's donut shop, which took me back to my childhood. Here's this donut counter with about 30 different varieties of donuts of all sorts. And, for me, it's like being a candy store. So take that, Tim Horton. But anyway, so I enjoyed the breakfast there. And then we were off to the Johnson Space Center. And of course, walking across the highway to get there, it's a bit of a jaunt, but this is what you're greeted by on the other side of the fence as you approach the entrance. The old 747 shuttle with one of the non-flying shuttles mounted on top of it. And that tower in behind it is the access that you climb up the steps to enter the two aircraft. And it's quite interesting to go through that, among other things. Elsewhere, the tram will take you to this huge facility that contains a fully assembled rocket with the Apollo capsule on it, the escape tower and everything else. And you know, you spend some time working around there, and then you go back past the Longhorn cattle that are on the Space Center grounds, and go back to the displays where they show all sorts of interesting artifacts from past missions, as well as talk about their future programs. And you know, they even have a little planetarium. And because this was the weekend before the eclipse, not to be outdone by anybody else, they had their total solar eclipse NASA van. And I got somebody to take a photograph of me standing in front of it. One of the few times I ever get a photograph taken of me on these jaunts. Anyway, it was a good way to pass the day. Notice though that a weather front had come up and our blue sky had disappeared. In fact, that was one of the problems that we had, because while the climatological data said that we should have relatively clear skies, reality reared its ugly head in the worst way possible. And this cloud shield was moving in, and it covered practically the entire state of Texas. Next morning, our bus driver, Robin, showed up bright and early with this lovely luxury van. This was our conveyance down to Del Rio for 6.5 hours. So along the way, we stopped in at Buc-ee's, which bills itself as the biggest and most well-equipped gas and rest stop around. And, you know, pretty good claim, you know, souvenirs of every sort that you could ever imagine, and some that you can't imagine, and food of all sorts in huge quantities, you know, and their crews are singing out as they chop up the beef brisket and make up the sandwiches and so on. It's really quite a show. And it's not very expensive either, which was a nice surprise. But the 6.5 hours brought us to Del Rio, and here's the Eclipse Festival grounds at Del Rio, where Phil Chou and a few of the other members of our group went as soon as we arrived in Del Rio and got checked in. And again, the check-in went relatively smoothly. You know, hand in the credit card, swipe it, get the key, everything seems fine. And, you know, the rest of the evening is at leisure. And lots of vendors at the site. This is the night before the eclipse, so people are just setting up things. Well, they had been set up since Friday, but you know, at this point it wasn't too heavily attended. Lots of things to see. Here's Phil with Kai and let's see, who is that? Genevieve Seabrook and Joel Parks. They're having a gander at all of the things on offer at the place, including the Chamber of Commerce, which had all sorts of Del Rio Eclipse paraphernalia on offer. And here's Ann Nickel, Dennis's wife, with Carolyn and Gareth. And they met up with us in Del Rio as planned. So all 22 people are on site. The bus itself, we had a 30-passenger coach, which was a good thing because we unexpectedly had to take on Dennis and Ann from Houston. Ann had flown down on Friday night, and Dennis went to pick her up. And on the way back to the hotel, which is a 45-minute drive from the airport, he hit a pothole at about 110 kilometers an hour. Oh, there you are, Dennis. Yeah. You're still in one piece at any rate. Unfortunately, his car wasn't. They expect to have the car back, mid-June or thereabouts? We'll see. Well, anyway, to make a long story short, we ended up having to accommodate Dennis and Ann and their equipment and everything. Well, luckily we had the space, so that was good. Okay, so next morning, I'm up early looking for the weather because, of course, the night before going to bed, I knew it was cloudy. So what are the chances of things clearing up? And this is my screen grab of windy.com, which is one of the sites that I was looking at. And the area on this map where we're interested in is, now let's just see if I can get this mouse to do something. Oh yeah, there it is. So we're looking, let's see, in roughly this area right here to see what's going on. And the thing is that in looking at this, one of the things that Windy does is give you the probabilities of precipitation, as well as cloud cover, wind direction, and so on. And in doing that, looking at where we could go deeper into the path of totality from Del Rio, we could either go back along Highway 90, which is what we took to come in from Houston, or we could go down 277 towards Radar Base, which is right on the center line. Now, we had originally been thinking about setting up at Radar Base, but it turned out that that was a bad choice because between the time that we looked at it and the time of the eclipse, they installed 2 large encampments for detained refugees and immigrants, as well as all of the custodial staff. And they'd increased the patrols in this area as a result. And there really wasn't any place that was, shall we say, easy to get at in Radar Base to park that big bus. So we had to look at alternative arrangements. And it turned out that as you go down here from Del Rio, there is actually a very nice rest stop, which you can see on this aerial shot here, just north of Radar Base. And so we thought this might be a good spot to look at. Question was, would we be better to go off this way or come down this way? And looking at it, windy.com said, probability of precipitation down this track, 11%. Down this track, 24%. And our driver, Robin, told me that just outside of Bracketville here on this highway, there's a mandatory stop for immigration inspection. And there's no guarantee how long it'll take to get through that. So given that, as well as the probabilities of precipitation, I thought, okay, let's go down 277 instead. And I explained that to the group at a very early meeting after breakfast, and away we went. And this is the view out of the bus as we were traveling down 277, just outside of Del Rio. And you can see it's wall-to-wall cloud, but it's broken cloud, lots of gaps. So we were counting on that to a certain degree. We got down to the rest stop. There were a lot of cars there, but we were the only bus. It turned out that another bus had come in there, looked around, and decided it wasn't for them, and they moved on. So we came in and took over their space, and then unloaded and got everything out onto the picnic ground, the side grass. And you can see these shots from Shraddha and Lucy. We were set up pretty quickly. Lucy decided that my telescope deserved a visit from Artemus, the little moose that she brought along for the trip. clad in a NASA spacesuit and all that. And there's a shot of Artemis dangling from my tripod. Anyway, what happened on the eclipse? Well, it was dicey, as you can see, but the clouds did open and close periodically, and we did get to see things. This is my shot of first contact, or just shortly after first contact. And you can just barely see on this shot through the clouds the little nibble taken out at 3 o'clock as the moon starts to make its way. Second contact, it depended on where you were on the grounds, whether you actually saw it or not. Shraddha got it, I didn't. And we were about 5 meters apart. So it just depended on the angle. But here's my one of my shots of totality, and you can see those prominences that were so beautiful, and they showed up very, very nicely. When you look at this in bigger detail in a darkened room, it's really quite obvious that they are there. There's a slightly longer exposure, which also helped that the clouds opened up a little bit more. And you know, the problem with this is that you can scheme and plan all you want. Like I had already set up for auto bracketing just the same way that Dan had done. And when I saw the location and what the cloud conditions were like, I just turned the auto bracket off. There was no point because you know, it was just too capricious. So I just went with random exposures as the sun came and went through the clouds, and that's how I got these shots. I saw third contact, but I didn't image it, but I got Bailey's beads. So, okay, that's fine. Somebody else got the diamond ring, so we can still share it. And I held on to the very last minutes of the eclipse before the clouds really rolled in. And this is not defocused. This is the intense cloud. If you look at this image, again, under high magnification, the sun's limb is actually sharply focused. And you can just see the moon up here just before it left, about a minute and a half or so before fourth contact. So we got the whole eclipse basically with, as we calculate, approximately 4 minutes and 26 seconds of total eclipse. So a bit better than what we would have gotten here. And here's the timings from my logbook. Didn't actually see fourth contact, but got the other 3. So that worked out reasonably well. And Shraddha, like I said, 5 meters away, and she actually successfully imaged all the way along, and she put this together almost literally overnight to show that we in fact did see the whole darn thing. So that was really quite fun. Here's our celebratory gathering. I took the old Eclipse flag along. Dennis had another flag with the Toronto Centre's seal on it. We put those up in the picnic shelter, and a lot of people took images of it during the course of the morning. So you know, people were aware that we were there, and yeah, we celebrated with a nice Mexican dinner that evening. And then the next day, we were up early to head back. Got to the airport and checked in with 3 hours to spare for the flight home. So here are our youngest members, Shraddha's 2 sons and Max Chou, waiting in the airport concourse for our flight home. And as we flew home, Shraddha looked out the window and she caught this view, and she and Connie Booth both imaged this lovely sight of the crescent moon the night after the eclipse. So they both unwittingly managed to do something that a lot of eclipse chasers do, which is trying to find the crescent moon as early as possible after total eclipse. So another fine tradition upheld. So we chalk up another successful eclipse. Here's my co-organizer, Lucy Winicki, who did an awful lot of the preparation work. So I want to tip my hat to her for all of the help she gave. And here's Robin, our driver, who was really, really helpful with a lot of advice about what we could expect, especially about the highway immigration stops and so on. And he made it possible for us to get to and from without any incident. So that was a good thing, and we're grateful to him for that. So again, a nice successful eclipse, and well, as Dan was saying, we're seriously thinking about the next 3 total eclipses in 26, 27, and 28. And so it'll be interesting to see where we go for those. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, great.
Well documented. Thank you, Ralph, for sharing your adventure with us. Glad that you got to see it as well. All right, so we're gonna take a short break for our online folks as we prepare for our next speaker. We'll be right back. In here. All right, and we're back online, and our next presenter is Ed Treijs talking about a boring eclipse.
Thank you. I hope not to bore you with my presentation, though. Let's have that. So just a bit of backstory. 2017 was the first total solar eclipse I ever saw. The Saturday afternoon, the eclipse was on a Monday. I got together with 2 people who I got connected through some online stuff. And we planned out where we would go. And Monday afternoon, we saw the eclipse from just west of Nashville, Tennessee. So it was all pretty quickly arranged. And the lesson I took from that particular eclipse was just do it. So it's a little bit different for 2024 versus 2017. In 2017, sorry, you had to travel some way to see the eclipse. You had to go down to the United States. 2024 was on our doorstep, and in fact, when I checked my house, I would have had 99.93% totality, which is really nice, but it's not complete totality. So I do have a friend in Port Dover, which is on the shore of Lake Erie. It's maybe like 80 kilometers west of Niagara Falls, I think, maybe 100, something like that. You go in the opposite direction from Niagara Falls, from Hamilton, kind of to the southwest, and that's where he is. Hopefully not too many crowds and the good Lake Erie shore weather, or the relatively better. But what if it was cloudy locally? How far would I travel? And that's kind of the trade-off you make. When it's right on your doorstep and you say, well, it's a 50% chance of being clear and it's 60% chance by traveling for 2 days, which should I take? And of course, if you travel the 2 days and get clouded out anyway and everyone at home saw it, then it's kind of like you're eating some crow. Well, and then we were all watching the weather, and the forecasts for Lake Erie were really good, and then they were bad. And Frank Dempsey, who I've been on trips before, weather forecasting guru, had rented an RV quite some time ago, but apparently the RV people are not like hotel people, and they didn't jack up the price. He offered me a seat. We were going to southern Quebec somewhere, and I wished my friend in Port Dover the best of luck and signed up for that expedition. And I would say that even though Frank obviously worked it through very closely, if you're just looking at Environment Canada's forecast a few days beforehand, it's like Sherbrooke, clear and sunny. Sherbrooke, clear and sunny. So that was kind of like where you might think of going. So then we had the quest for the observing spot. We spent Sunday night in Drummondville, Quebec. We did rent a hotel room, but I stayed in the RV, and I just left Frank and Jennifer and his wife Jennifer in the hotel. We said hi to Ron McNaughton, who was having supper in the very same restaurant that we were having supper in just off the A15 in Drummondville. Yes, the usual suspects were gathering. So Monday, we headed to Sherbrooke, which is just like a 45-minute drive maybe from Drummondville, and then we turned east. So we went through small towns in the eastern townships. We went through East Angus and we went to Scottstown. We saw some reasonable possible spots, but we did carry on. Scottstown actually had people already setting up kind of in this little valley area. These are not big towns, by the way. These are teensy towns. So we went to a town called La Patrie, which is a small town. I would say it's pretty much in the middle of nowhere, but it's also in the middle of totality on the center line. So the red line there is the center line of the eclipse, and we were about where that marker is. So I think that's pretty good. Like, we were fairly close to the center line. Could maybe do better, but be pretty hard. You might have to shove over a few meters. So huge crowds in La Patrie, let me tell you. There's the rented RV, the big beast. It goes quickly downhill and very slowly uphill. I think it has like a minivan engine in it, but weighs a whole lot more. It's kind of maybe a little bit hard to tell. This is actually a gravel road that runs off the main highway, and it runs to basically a little bulge or turnaround bulge, and there's like some houses there, and there's a house or two on the other side. And this is looking the other way along the road. This is the front of our van, and that is actually the big church of La Patrie, and there's a few other houses. The main village crossroads is down there. So it was a nice view from where we were. We were up on a bit of a hillside. And if you look at this, I think it's this like double peak there. That's actually the Mont Megantic Observatory. So that's about where we were. If you've been to the Mont Megantic Observatory, that's where we were. If you want to know where it is, it's a little ways from La Patrie, so maybe that helps. Apparently that place got booked out very quickly, and they must have had a great view because they're at the top of the mountain. So got to pick my spot, which I did. And I felt like king of the hill. So just as a note, like I was very, very lightweight. I had a pair of binoculars, which I could not use obviously during the partial phase because I had no solar filters. I had YARAC Eclipse glasses, and I had a point and shoot camera. I tried taking some pictures through the glasses of the partial phase and it did not work. So I just kind of sat back and relaxed and watched the moon slide over the sun. So the area was filling up a little bit. There was a second parallel road just like a little bit below us. Whoops, that's singing at me. So this is like our road, which was a gravel road, and then there's another road parallel. This is a municipal park. There's actually an interpretive station and everything, and people were getting there. And as we got quite close to Totality, way down in the valley, there's a road that leads from La Patrie to, I think, the border with Vermont, if I'm not mistaken. And it was empty beforehand, but by the time it was getting close and we were in the partial phase, that's not a traffic jam. Those are people who just pulled over and said, we're where it's Totality, and now we're going to pull over and we're going to watch that thing. And I don't think there was any sûreté going around and rousting them out. I'm positive that they saw Totality from that location. So we're almost there. Like I said before, with a continuous unobstructed view, just sitting back in my chair because I'm not fiddling with cameras or anything. It was really easy to kind of imagine the moon, the disk of the moon sliding over the sun. It was pretty cool. I tried to get the crescent shapes, but there weren't really very many trees. There were some fir trees, but it was also quite windy. It was gusty winds, and as the light went down, it almost felt apocalyptic. Hopefully no zombies show up because it's like getting dark and there's gusts coming in from the north. Oh, and here's Totality. Yay. My $25 bought on Kijiji point and shoot didn't get a very good picture. Frank got a very much better picture. I believe it's through a telescope. I certainly saw all those 4 prominences with my binoculars, which now I could use. And I did get a chance to look through one of Frank's telescopes. And this is the shot of the area. There's really not much of a sunset effect. It was more like a nautical twilight effect because it was very clear. I guess that's something I didn't quite belabor, but if you look at the blue sky, we're not too worried about clouds there. It was perfectly clear. So that's our Totality, savor the moment. It was like 3.5 minutes, and there were a lot of oohs and ahs, as you can imagine. I did have a flawed experiment. Just past the diamond ring at the end of Totality, I was hoping, because we were up fairly high and we had a good view, I was hoping to see whether I could get a picture of the eclipse shadow moving away from us. Unfortunately, I think I was looking in the wrong direction, and you can kind of tell that. I should have looked, the Totality path didn't go off this way, it went off kind of that way, and you can kind of tell from this picture too, because it's darker over here and it's lighter over there. So maybe I could have caught it if I looked more towards the Mont Megantic Observatory, and quite possibly the people at that observatory on the mountaintop might have gotten like a great view of this. I don't know, it would be very interesting to find out. So some impressions of the eclipse, sense of moon sliding over the sun. The other thing, and I'm not sure I remember this from 2017, is you think it's dim when it's like 80% covered, and you think it's really quite dim when it's at 95% and there's just a thin crescent. But in the last 3 or 4 seconds, it really had a sense to me that there was a dimmer switch and someone was just pulling it down. It was just like going, and like everyone's yelling, there it goes, there it goes. And I took off the eclipse glasses and actually saw the diamond ring and the corona in a still blue sky. So I guess I timed that right. And interestingly enough, I talked to someone at work here in Toronto who lived in Burlington and not quite in Totality, but he said that yes, for a moment he did see the corona and the diamond ring effect from his place. So if I'd stayed at home, I might have seen the corona and the diamond ring because I was at 99.93%, so like only a few kilometers away from the path. But of course, Totality is better. The end of Totality I found was kind of the reverse. Someone's gone to the dimmer switch and said, hey, it's a little bit too dark, let's turn it up. The really odd thing, and I didn't notice this when we were heading towards Totality, is like for the first little bit, and I can't really estimate the amount of time, maybe 10 seconds, maybe 30 seconds, maybe a bit longer, it feels like there's a single halogen bulb lighting up the whole world. It's nicely color corrected, but it's not that bright. And I guess the analogy I have is like someone turns on the house lights in a theater after Totality. That was a kind of a cool thing to note. Where did everyone come from in southern Quebec there in the eastern townships? Saw license plates from all over the place, obviously Ontario, Michigan, Indiana, Minnesota, West Virginia, Connecticut, Alberta, New Brunswick, New York, and I'm sure there's a bunch of others, Delaware, like all over. I think there were like California even. Two groups at least came to La Patrie from Texas. So to follow up on Dan's ponderings there, yes, that happened. One group apparently drove up in a last-minute hurry, I guess, and one group flew, and there's probably no super direct flights between Montreal and Houston or whatever, so apparently it was quite the trip, and renting a car in Montreal on the Monday might have been a bit tough. But they did, and they wound up in La Patrie, just like we did heading out from Toronto. And next to us on that roadway, there was a family from France. Obviously, they didn't drive over. They must have planned this one out ahead of time, and they quite enjoyed the eclipse as well. So who had the typical eclipse experience? And I say it's the Texans, right? You're going through the whole, oops, okay, you're going through the whole steps of, it's not quite the steps of grief or whatever, where you're in anger and denial and whatever, but it's like, what's the weather going to be? What's this forecast? Yikes. We're all clouded out. We must go to Quebec. We have only hours to get there, and scramble, 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 panic, panic, panic. Sound familiar to anyone? Who had the atypical eclipse experience? I would say it's the Frank Eclipse Expedition. Let's go to Quebec. Oh, okay, yeah, no problem. Here's a nice spot on the center line. Lots of room to set up. Not a cloud in the sky, not a cloud approaching or anywhere in the sky. So you could kick back, like I say, read a book, take a nap, wait for Totality. Oh, look, a perfect Totality. No problem. So if you're a script writer, the Texan story is what you'd want to dramatize. Got uncertainty, tension, malign fate, dashed expectations, obstacles, the quest, the impossible quest, the struggle to achieve your dream. There's drama there. For me and going with Frank, we relaxed, we could have a nap and watch Eclipse. Boring. So in summary, I saw the eclipse, it was good, and sometimes boring is actually what you want. I will add a postscript to thank La Patrie afterwards. There really are no stores, there were no souvenirs. You don't get like I love La Patrie mugs, so I went to the SAQ, which is their version of the LCBO, and purchased some local craft beer to celebrate. I've drunk most of it, the 9%. I'm kind of waiting for the appropriate moment because that's probably going to knock me down. My friend in Port Dover did see the eclipse, and it's kind of a funny story because we're all kind of really big. We're here because we like astronomy, and we're here today because we like total solar eclipses. When I told to him, there's going to be a total eclipse, he goes, well, that's interesting. I said, well, you really want to see it? Maybe it would be interesting. So he finally did see the eclipse. He went to Tilsonburg, and apparently it was quite clear there. And he reported to me it was spectacular with the 3 exclamation marks. So I think he decided that it was worth seeing. And in the end, I guess it's all's well that ends well. That's my boring eclipse story. Mhm.
Let's see, any questions for let's see, anyone approaching the mic? Is he going to take the mic or is he going to ask a question?
Is somebody gonna give me a book to stand on? No questions. I just wanted to acknowledge the interesting conversation going on over YouTube. There have been points brought up about where they viewed the eclipse from. Birds, that apparently different birds were singing during Totality, etc. It's actually a really interesting conversation. So if you can't make any future meeting, it's definitely worth joining and participating online.
Mhm.
No questions for Ed? No? Okay, well.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I think we're going to have to take another short break, and we'll be back with our next speaker. All right, welcome back. Our next speaker is Jason Oakley, and he'll tell us about his experience at Crystal Beach near Fort Erie.
All right. So yeah. So this here is just a map from Xavier Jubier's Path of the Eclipse, where you can get the eclipse timings. This was essentially how I decided on the location. You know, there's the central eclipse line. It's a bit hard to see, but it's in blue here. Fort Erie would have been the maximum eclipse duration in Canada. I didn't have the option to, oh, yeah, right, near the mic. I didn't have the option to travel far because my work, I'm a teacher. I wasn't even sure at first that I'd be able to make Eclipse Day, but then they, as you may know, they canceled school that day and made made it a PD day for teachers, which allowed me to travel without missing school. I actually planned this. I booked a hotel in the fall. Not completely sure I'd be able to make it, but prepared to cancel and just make a field trip to Hamilton instead if I needed to. But what ended up happening, the PD day happened. I did stick with my original plan. You might wonder, okay, so if you're going for the maximum location in Canada, why not Fort Erie? And it's a bit hard to see in this zoom. I just wanted it to keep the geography of the area. So, this is Buffalo and this is Niagara, where of course a lot of people went so they could see the eclipse with the background of the falls. But I was looking at this shoreline and I picked Crystal Beach because I just saw a large beach area and I didn't want, I planned to set up telescopes and a camera. And in the Fort Erie area, I was looking at beaches and I was just like, oh, these look kind of small. And here I saw this nice long stretch and I'm like, oh, okay. So even if it's crowded, there will definitely be room for me to set up and find a location that I like. So that's, and then I don't have another slide that shows the difference in the timings, but it's less than 1 second difference between the length of totality between over here and over here. So anyways, this was I did know what I was getting into in terms of cloud cover. This was a couple days. Yes, this was me checking the forecast on Saturday or very late Friday night actually. And I was like, uh-oh. And I'm like, oh, that looks a little right in a whole bunch of cloud. And of course, I'm not going to take these little gaps too seriously. I briefly considered the possibility of heading further west, and then I'm like, but the problem is then I still have to head back east, and that runs me into the fact that I would need to be back at school the next morning. So I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm just gonna go there, hope for the best. And so this is a photo. This is a photo of my setup. So I brought both my telescopes there. This was actually because I did anticipate a crowd, right? It's one of the better locations to see it in Canada. This beach ended up being one of the ones chosen by the region of Fort Erie as a designated eclipse viewing area. I actually had gone there the night before in a sort of a practice run to set up my equipment and to check that that I had the alignment on it. Well, the alignment and the latitude. So that these are both equatorial mounts, and I wanted to check that I had the latitude set up correctly and the north alignment working when I actually had the North Star to look at. Especially given that the night before was actually clear. It was a very clear night the night before. I don't have photographs, but I did manage to look at Jupiter. And there were some other people that were there on the beach the previous night that I got a chance to talk to, some local astronomers. And next day, my parents were I was ready to go to the beach by 8 in the morning. I was like, I want to make sure I get my spot. My parents were a little less up and at 'em, but things worked out. We got there around 11. It was already quite busy, not quite as busy as this. This photo's not from 11, but it was quite busy. But the spot I wanted, which was I chose, I didn't want to be on the sandy part of the beach. You can see they're hard to see in the photo, but there are quite a few telescopes set up along the actual sandy part of the beach. But I wanted somewhere where the ground was a little bit firmer, and also a little bit more of a vantage point. That wasn't so much for the telescopes because they're going to be pointed up, but that was for me because I wanted to make sure. There is a third tripod here actually with a regular. So over here there's telescope. This is the camera that, well, the goal is to have it pointed at the sun. Right here, it is pointed at a whole bunch of cloud cover. And then there's a second telescope here. So the extra telescopes were really because I expected the crowd and wanted to to let other people look, and as many people as possible. And of course, I can be looking through one while someone's looking through the other. I don't have photographs of that, but it did happen in our gaps where we did get to see the sun. So despite this photo looking pretty solidly cloudy, I did manage to get some shots of the partial eclipse. I originally, actually, I can show you in the previous. Everything here is set up with filters. This filter I've actually originally bought for the Venus transit. Actually, no, wait, no, it's this filter I bought for the Venus transit. It was a little bit too small for this telescope. Instead of fitting over it, it actually fits inside the dew shield. So I ended up buying one for this telescope more recently. And then there's also a filter that you can't see on top of this camera. And I started off, so sometime, maybe I can't remember the time on this, but maybe 15, 20 minutes into the partial phase, I managed to get the sun for the first time, and I took a photo, and I looked at it, and you can see it's quite blurry around the edge, and it's even this sunspot's quite blurry. And the exposure on it, I looked at the exposure, and I think it was something like a 1/4 second exposure. The ISO had gone up. I set it to automatic settings because honestly, I know manual is better. But given the cloud cover was really coming in and out, and I was like, I don't want to deal with that. I'm just gonna let the camera make adjustments, and I'm going to mostly I'm talking to people at this point, about the eclipse and things like that. But I took one look at this shot, and I'm like, that is not good. And it was also at it was a 6400 ISO without getting into the photography weeds. So I'm like, that's not getting enough light. And I look up through the eclipse glasses, and I'm like, I can barely see that sun. And I'm like, you know what? Forget the glasses for a second. And I looked, and I'm like, you know what? With the naked eye, that's actually pretty comfortable to look at. I'm like, I'm taking the filter off the camera, which I did, and actually got a much better photo without the filter. You can see that it's fairly sharp. You can even see sunspot over here. This was actually, and of course, this modeling is because you are looking at the sun through clouds. This ended up being 1/5000th of a second exposure, and at I think 200 ISO. So that's the much. This is what happens when you now get all the light coming through instead of 1/100,000th. After that, I just kept taking photos. I actually set the camera. I was really trying to lazy mode this. I just set the camera to take automatic photos every 20 seconds or so that I could just kind of keep looking through my telescopes, talking to people, letting them look through. Right. The telescopes I did not take the filters off of for the risk that the clouds would suddenly open up on someone when they were looking through. So they would get this sort of image, although it didn't actually look blurry with the naked eye, because of course this blur is an artifact of vibration and a long exposure. So these are just some more photographs I got during the partial phases, the better ones. There was a lot where it's just really cloudy and you don't see much. This one's probably my favorite. Because just because of the overall effect of the cloud. The sun's fairly bright. You can see the sunspot quite well. Actually, this sunspot and another one over here quite well. This is just a photograph of me taking photographs just for fun. This was around the same time. So if you look closely at it, you see that actually the camera, just because of the way it's connected to the mount, the camera's actually on its side. And what that means is, so this photograph is actually the view that you would see if you were looking up through the eclipse glasses or through the telescopes. And then this is what it looks like tilted on its side. And I've just rotated it, and of course cropped the top and bottom so that the sideways view of the camera frame is fitting on the PowerPoint slide. I think this is the last good shot I got before the before the clouds fully just moved in and just parked themselves where in the sky, and you couldn't see a thing. So this was a little bit before, about probably a little less than half an hour before totality, a little bit before, so 3 o'clock, right? At this location, totality is from around 3:18 to 3:22, a little bit less than 4, so like 10, I think from 5 seconds, 3:18:05-ish to around 3:21:50. So this is in the 250s. I forget the exact time, and then after that, just solid cloud cover until totality. So I do not have any shots of totality, but I did have the tripod with the camera just taking video the whole time. And then what I did is I I don't know if that's picking it up. This is it. That's the moon shadow. So the main thing that actually you can see a little. I'll just let you hear a little bit of the crowd's excitement. Horizon. Yes, I see it. The main thing, really though, that you could really get very well with it being cloudy is you could see this is before totality. You could actually see the moon shadow approaching from the west. So it's really dark. You can right, and you can see the edge of it coming closer and closer. This camera doesn't pick it up very well, but you could actually also see the shadow moving across the surface of the lake as well from the distance. We're approaching totality right around now, and this is it. You can see it gets quite dark. It doesn't look quite this dark in real life, as I'm sure you know, because of our eyes adjust to the darkness. But this camera is set at a relatively constant exposure. So to the camera, it looks quite dark. I don't know if you hear it all, but I don't know if you hear that all, but that's the crowd screaming. If you look, there's all kinds of flashing from camera. Lots of everyone is bringing out their cell phones right now. So that was really cool thing to experience. And at this point, it's pretty solidly dark. We're about a minute into the eclipse, but the other thing you can see if you look at the western sky is now you see the exact reverse of what happened before. You can actually see light on the western horizon, right? You can see outside of the moon shadow, which you do get that effect, of course, in a fully clear sky. But I think I will. I'm going to speed up the sort of the remaining, the remaining bits of totality, so that it's just running twice as fast as normal. You do continue to see the lightning in the west. Now this effect here, though, this isn't one where it seems to be getting lighter. That didn't happen in real life. What is actually happening is that it's gotten darker, even darker in the middle, sort of the middle of totality. And you see the camera has made a color adjustment. If you notice, this has gone from white, so this is lighting at the bathrooms, and it has gone brighter because the overall scene has become quite dark from the perspective of the camera. You'll see it start now that we're getting more light in the west. You can see that this went back to being yellow, and that's the camera making an adjustment again. So I'll just switch that back to normal and hopefully get. So now we're getting pretty close to the end of totality. The sky is quite bright in the west. You now see that the lake is getting bright again. Over here, the camera, now the foreground looks darker than it really is because the camera, of course, is responding to this light in the west. So the foreground looks darker than it really is. And this here is our end of the total phase. And the sky right above us gets bright again. So Anyway, so that's my video of Totality of Totality. Was a really cool experience even without being able to see the actual sun, because of the crowd's energy, also the effect on the clouds. There are some, I didn't manage to get good photos of it. I did look and see it, but the problem is the iPhone, which I use to take the other photos, adjusts too much to the change in the light, so it doesn't look the way it does to the human eye. But when Totality was approaching and you looked due south, you could actually see the dark region of the lake in the west, and you could see like a dividing line, but where it was dark, and then where it's bright from where the sun, well, not sun, well, yeah, where the light still is. And then the reverse effect, actually I forgot to take the reverse effect. I was too busy looking at it to remember to take up my camera and take a photo in reverse. But towards the tail end of the total phase, the exact reverse happened. There was light up on the west when you were looking south, and then a dark region in the east. This was the very first photo that I managed to get after Totality during the partial phases. The clouds stayed for honestly about a solid 30 minutes. There was a nice hour block centered on Totality where the clouds were just like, yeah, we're not moving. We're just making sure you can't see anything. And then finally, this was around 50 past, so a half hour after Totality, I got my first shot of the partial phases, and of course the moon is now on the other side. I got another shot here with the moon continuing to move, revealing the sunspot in the center. And not long after, I got this shot shown right here in the corner. This is the entire camera frame. You can't really even see where the sun is because it's massively overexposed. That is actually the camera's minimum exposure at its minimum light sensitivity. So this is 1/16,000th of a second. And I took one look at that and I was just like, yeah, you know what? I think it's time to put the filter back on before I roast my sensor. So that's this shot. About a couple minutes later, you can see it's roughly the same amount of the sun's disk covered, but now I'm back with the filter again, and I have a few more filter shots. Right, these are just ones arbitrarily about 7 minutes apart. Just you can see the progression of the moon across the sun's disk. My original plan was actually to do a, if it was sunny, was to do a time lapse series with a set sort of exposure, and just every like 20 seconds or so, and then I would be able to make a time lapse video. But that didn't happen. These shots, the cloud still is coming in and out, so these are not exactly every 7 minutes. They're the ones where I get a shot where there isn't too much cloud obscuring the sun's disks. They're just selected for being relatively clear. There's shrouded cloud moving over kind of in bands at this point. So this is the last of my partial photos that I have here. This comic from XKCD was, I didn't see it on the day of the eclipse. It was posted that day, but it was drawn to my attention actually by the Rask forum. I believe the day following. I can't exactly remember when I saw it. I was not setting out to get as many of these as possible. I did obviously get the partial, did not get any total. Technically, I have a pretty good lens, except that it was only taking partial. I think my focus was good. I did end up getting the traffic jam shot, even though I didn't know about this comic until after the traffic jam. But as I think at least some of you know, the QEW, in fact, probably most of you, if not all, the QEW was a disaster. It was not moving. I should have actually maybe taken video just to show just how not moving it really was. This is us trying to make an escape. We're trying to take the, I forget what the name of it, but the service road, try to get onto the service road because the GPS thought that would be clearer than the main highway. It wasn't. Everyone else, I think, looked at their GPS, got the same instruction, and the service road was just as bad. But this was me being like, you know what, this is ridiculous. I'm taking a photo of this. And yeah, you can see it's packed. You see all the red tail lights. Nobody's moving. It took more than 3 hours to get back from Toronto. It took an hour and a half to get there the day before. So anyways, I did get the traffic shot. But you know, it was a great experience. I did get home, 10 p.m.ish. Wasn't too bad. That was my parents' place, so I still had another hour to drive back to Toronto. All in all, absolutely worth it. The traffic was worth it. The great thing about the eclipses in 26, 27, and 28 is that they're all in the summer, which means as a teacher, I will have that time off, and I'm gonna just stay wherever I go for those. I end up going for those eclipses. I am staying there for at least an extra day after the eclipse, so that I'm not trying to get back home when everyone else is. Anyways, just some links. I post some of my astronomy photos there on Instagram. It's mostly the sun and moon because I live in Toronto, so don't get too excited about the Astrobin link. There's literally one photo there. I only discovered Astrobin recently through Rask. So yeah. Are there any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason, for sharing your adventure with us. Let's see. I think that wraps it up for tonight for speakers. So do we need to go to fun facts for a moment while we prepare the announcements? Okay, we'll be right back then. All right, so announcements are next. Tom Luton will take care of those.
All right, and thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to our wonderful speakers. And let's get on with our announcements. My name's Tom Luton. I'm the president of the Toronto Centre. Here's a little hint of what's coming for next month with our next bunch of Eclipse observers. So we've got two types of meetings here online and at the Ontario Science Centre. You've just seen one of our recreational astronomy nights, and then coming up in a couple of weeks is one of our speaker nights. If you're joining us via the YouTube chat, please say hello. Please enter some questions for presenters. If you're a new member, please introduce yourself. And if you're coming to us from far outside the Toronto area, please let us know where you're coming from. So our next recreational astronomy night is the 5th of June, 7:30 p.m. in person at the Ontario Science Centre and online as well. The sky this month will be returning. The presenter is still TBA. Dave Pluskauskas, I apologize for mangling that. We'll be talking about the eclipse at Six Nations, and the open slot has been filled because I will be talking about the eclipse from Long Point. Our next speaker's night is Tuesday, May 14th. Note the different time. Because of a scheduling issue, we've moved it one day forward. So normally it would be on the 15th. This month it will be on the 14th. If it's not good for your schedule, we will be, of course, posting it after the presentation. Maheen Hemani from York University will be giving the talk. The exact title is still to be announced. Quick notice, the Rask General Assembly is this weekend. Tickets are still on sale at raskga2024.ca, and they're still available. So solar observing coming up on May 4th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. We will be setting up outside the Ontario Science Centre right out front with some filtered telescopes. Folks can take a look at the sun when it is not being covered by the moon. This is a weather-dependent event. Always check our website for a go, no-go call prior to heading out. Our next city star party is Baby Village Park, the first clear night of the week of May 13th to 16th, but not the Wednesday. So that's Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, whichever is the first clear night, 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Again, check for a go, no-go decision based on the weather. Millennium Square Public Stargazing, our second star party at Millennium Square this year is on Friday, May the 17th, 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. Join us for an evening down by the lake. Millennium Square in Pickering. We'll be looking at the moon, stars through our telescopes. Take a look at some of the info that we got at the booth, ask us some questions, and if you would like to bring your own telescope, we'd be happy to help set it up and point it at the moon for you. Remember, things are cooler down by the lake, and as always, check our website for a go or no-go based on the weather. So, events at the DDO this coming month. So, Doors Open Richmond Hill is all day, Saturday, May the 11th, 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. This one is free and you don't need to register at all. Then on Saturday, May the 18th from 9:30 to 11:30 p.m. Is Astronomy Family Night. Registration fees are as shown. To register online, the links are available at raskto.ca. DDO Stargazing Night. Bring your own binoculars. The first clear night of the week of May 21st to 23rd. Event starts at sunset. No registration required. Just walk on in. Friday, May 24th, 9:30 to 11:30 p.m. Is DDO Astronomy Family Night. Again, registration fee is as shown. Links for registration at raskto.ca. DDO Planetarium Day for Little Astronomers is Saturday, May 25th, 11:30 a.m. to 12:15 p.m. Fees as shown, and links for registration are on our website. Then that afternoon from 1 to 2:30 p.m. is Planetarium Day for general audiences. And again, fees as shown and registration links can be found at raskto.ca. And then wrapping up the month, we've got Sunday sun gazing on May 26th, 12:30 to 1 p.m. The CAO, operations are largely back to pre-pandemic conditions. Still a couple of exceptions. The biggest one is that we're limiting usage of the bedrooms to 2 unrelated persons who mutually agree to share said room. Masking in common areas is still encouraged, but the preference of the folks in attendance will be taken. Public outreach events will be starting up for the summer months fairly shortly. And if you'd like to visit, please see the online CAO bookings page for details. And please read everything before making your booking. Our job board, we're still looking for a few bodies. We're looking for a volunteer committee chair. We're looking for a marketing committee chair and committee members. And our education public outreach committee is always in search of additional help, especially online presenters and telescope camera operators for any virtual star parties. A reminder that if you'd like to volunteer, you must be a member of the Toronto Centre. Thank you to everyone online who keeps sending me emails. But again, you've got to be a member first. And speaking about volunteers, Rask Toronto Centre is now working with Benevity to receive charitable donations. So if your employer is working with Benevity in order to match the donations of your charitable work, please let us know. Contact myself, president at rastio.ca, or Dennis Dray, our treasurer at treasurer@rastio.ca, so that we can get the paperwork together. This is the part where I get to plug membership. If you've liked what you've seen and you'd like to be a part of who we are and what we do, you can sign up online or renew your membership at secure.rask.ca. Gift memberships are also available in the national office at mempub@rask.ca. This is the part where I invite you to the meeting after the meeting. We will be joining here and heading over to the Granite Brewery. 245 Eglinton Avenue East in Mount Pleasant. We have free underground parking. Access is from or off of Mount Pleasant Road, and we are usually in the front room. One additional note, our new volunteer badges have finally arrived. I've got a whole bunch of them here. I've been giving them out this evening. If you were a volunteer or council member who have snuck in at the last moment, come on up and see me. I've gotten also comments from other folks, so it looks like we'll be putting together another run of badges in the not so distant future. And with that, I'd like to wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you very much for joining us. If you've liked what you've seen on YouTube, please like and subscribe and hit the notification bell, or follow us on all the various forms of social media that we've got listed here. Thanks again, be safe, and keep looking up. Good night, everyone.